what happens when we can start to re-optimize the brain in a way that it has never been optimized to function in within the virtual environment. The virtual thread environment is something that we were not evolved to operate in. And I think a large part of the burnout that we're seeing is because of this disconnect between what our evolutionary processes have optimized us for versus the environment that we're now asking the brain to operate in. And the consequence of that at a human level is what we call burnout. It's what we call anxiety. It's what we call hypervigilance. It's what we call the inability to sleep and switch off, to feel at ease, and to feel focused and completely in control when we need to be.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tammie Hollis, and I'm excited to be here today for the launch of Cybermindz TV. With me is Peter Coroneos, founder of Cybermindz.
Hi, Tammie. It's great to be with you today. I would like to introduce you, actually, if I could, at the outset, so people know who you are. So you are a practitioner. You're a long-standing practitioner within cybersecurity. You've also been part of a major breach, an incident, where you witnessed some of the burnout and the trauma that we're going to be talking about today. You also have completed a PhD on burnout in cybersecurity. So you are eminently placed to anchor this series because you've seen it from both perspectives, both from an academic standpoint, but also as someone that's been on the ground. So I just wanted to say how grateful we are that you've come into this role. And I'm now passing the microphone, as it were, back to you as the interviewer, and we're going to go from there.
Thank you, Peter. I have held a deputy CISO type role and other technical roles. For my doctoral research, I studied incident responders who had worked major cybersecurity incidents. I wanted to know what their experience was like, what the impacts were, and how that role compares with traditional first responders. I'm so glad to be here with you today, and thank you for the opportunity. Let's dive right in and talk about Cybermindz, the organization you started, and what your vision and inspiration were.
Yes, thanks, Tammie. So Cybermindz started in 2022. So we're entering our third year now. We're a not-for-profit. We were founded in Australia, but we've now launched and incorporated in the US and also the UK. And we're about to launch in France on the 16th of October, 2024. So within our third year, launching in 4 jurisdictions is really exciting. The background and the history of this, people may know I have worked in cybersecurity in a leadership role for 25 years. I was the head of Australia's Internet Industry Association back from 1997, where we began to see cybersecurity emerging as a major impediment to trust and uptake of the internet. And so I was fortunately in a position where we could do a lot of the early thought leadership, the legislative work, the educational and the empowerment programs, and even writing industry codes of best practice to help raise the level of engagement around cybersecurity as a priority and national. And ultimately, it's become an international priority. So that's my sort of cyber background. But equally in my life as a human on this planet, I was fortunate enough to have exposure to a lot of the personal development practices back from the 1970s. I was doing yoga and meditation, and also had a background in neuroscience from university. So Cybermindz for me is really the bringing together of these streams of how do we optimize our human mind to be happier and more effective and have greater longevity in these super important roles that we and our peers are now engaged in. We're attracting people into our community like yourself that are equally aligning with this sense of purpose. What can we do to help our peers to become effective and to remain in these roles? And I think so grateful to have such an amazing group of people coming in to support our work. One of the things that we've observed within cybersecurity is there has been a fairly good degree of awareness within the cybersecurity community itself on burnout. The human factors are the ones that continue to resurface within our community, so it's well known. But I think outside of the cybersecurity community, there's still a general lack of appreciation of just how unique these roles are, the stressors, and also the need to support teams not only for the individuals and the teams, but also organizationally and societally. So one of the challenges is really getting people outside of the cybersecurity community back into the C-suite, into human resources and people and culture, where they can begin to understand that the mission that we are engaged in cybersecurity really requires a certain level of support, perhaps even above and beyond in this day and age what you would give to an employee generally. And that's largely because of two things: the unique stressors that we've identified that are acting on cyber teams that are arguably more pernicious, more relentless, more damaging potentially than what a normal executive role or professional role might entail. And that is not to downplay stressors that are acting on other professions. We're not arguing that they are not also, that burnout isn't a thing throughout society. But the other thing is that the cybersecurity teams are engaged in roles that ultimately, if they fail, will have potentially existential effects on the organization, on society. There's definitely, we've seen those major breaches coming through. We've seen the impacts on tens of millions of people. When you see failures within the organization, they're not necessarily originating within the cyber team, but if the cyber team is not performing at peak and in a way that they can maintain a consistent effort, then that impacts on the ability of the organization to recover. So you've got this sense of how do we, in our words, how do we defend our defenders so that they can be the best that they can be? And if we are successful in that, then everyone benefits.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the IRES protocol?
So the IRES protocol is fairly central. It stands for Integrative Restoration, and it was developed by Dr. Richard Miller in California back in over 40 years, in fact. He's been iterating towards what has become a very efficacious, a very effective methodology for both prevention and also restoration of individuals. We use it now as the central methodology within Cybermindz, our programs that we're bringing in. It's effectively a 10-step sequence where you're bringing the brain into slower brainwave activity, lowering hypervigilance and hyperactivation, getting us out of flight and fight. And over time, we start to rebuild a new sense of resilience, a new sense of what we call an inner locus of control that becomes the default. And so people regularly report a greater sense of emotional regulation, a better ability to switch off when they're off duty, better sleep, better relationships, more capacity to empathize with people around them. And so there's a whole raft of benefits. Richard Miller took the IRES protocol into the US military around 2004. And subsequently, they had done a number of studies, clinical studies, with veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan with PTSD, complex trauma, anxiety, depression, the whole gamut of psychological disorders that we are starting to observe within cybersecurity. And so it struck me with this strong grounding in very legitimate and neuroscientifically based aspects of the protocol. So it's something that is very clearly measurable to show what happens when you bring the brain out of those hypervigilant states. What happens when we can start to re-optimize the brain in a way that it has never been optimized to function in within the virtual environment. The virtual threat environment is something that we were not evolved to operate in. And I think a large part of the burnout that we're seeing is because of this disconnect between what our evolutionary processes have optimized us for versus the environment that we're now asking the brain to operate in. And so I think this is the bringing together of IRES into the cybersecurity community for the first time is something that we are passionate about. It's our mission. And we've got the support of Richard Miller. And, he's trained 7,000 facilitators worldwide. So we have the capacity to scale. And so I think we're really standing at the edge of this opportunity now where we're ready to come in and provide the assistance to cyber teams to keep them at the top of their game.
You also have Rapid Reset and Steady Shield. Would you like to share a little bit more about both of those programs?
All of our programs integrate the IRS protocol. The difference between them is that some of them are coming in as a preventative program, so that we're trying to build the resilience into the teams before they enter these breach type situations. And so Steady Shields is designed as a 12-month sustainability program where we come in and we're supporting teams and we're building the resilience in a way before they're called into action. Also, we have Rapid Reset, which is designed as a trauma support and prevention program for teams that are in an active breach situation or have recently come through a breach situation. And the idea there is that, you are experiencing trauma as you're in these states of hypervigilance, potentially fear and other states that are impacting on your ability to be fully present with the work, with the challenge, because you're constantly getting flipped into your emotional response, into the amygdala in the brain, is really being hyperactivated. You're in high levels of cortisol, and that is in turn impacting on your ability to actually be grounded in the prefrontal cortex, where you're able to actually be doing the forensic and the clear decision making that you need. So if the trauma is not properly managed during the process of a breach, then you will find that you'll get a long tail of after effects that can persist actually for years. And we see that within the military community. You hear about PTSD going for decades because it's never been properly resolved. And so our approach within Rapid Reset is to actually come in during a breach situation or immediately after it, so that we can provide the remediation and the restoration of people back into a state of groundedness and wellness, so that the organization is both fulfilling its moral and ethical obligations to their employees, but also, more importantly, that the employees are not going to leave their roles and to resign, which we are seeing as a result of an unmanaged trauma through a major cyber breach.
I'm thinking about the pieces in my research where incident responders told me about the emotional responses and when they had to be able to think. And so they explained having to switch back and forth. And I named that rapid succession micro resiliencies. So it was something that went on throughout the incidents, that switching back and forth. And so to have something that addresses that is just amazing. Talk to me about what base camp is and the base camp metaphor.
Yeah, actually, it is a metaphor. It came to me as an image, actually, of a team that was about to ascend to climb a mountain. And in a way, that's what we're doing here. So, mental health and building mental resilience is it can be an individual practice, but it's really more effectively done in a team, because we've got the capacity to support each other. It's building the team morale and the sense of camaraderie and mutual support that is a critical success factor in getting us through these difficult challenges. So for me, I thought, well, if you're going to ascend a mountain together, if you're going to do the ascent, then it's really important that you're properly prepared for that. And so what does preparation look like for us? For us, it's giving the cyber teams that are about to, and their related colleagues, maybe in IT or adjacent professions. So it's really important that the teams understand how and why they're doing what they're doing when they do our training. And so to give them a grounding, because cybersecurity professionals are naturally curious. They want to know how things work. They want to get into the nuts and bolts. And so because we're able to come in with this really interesting narrative around human evolution and how the brain has evolved to both detect and respond to physical threats, and then to explain how what they're doing in their role is really not, we're asking more of the brain than it was effectively designed to do. And so how is it that we can come and effectively hack that system and bring in new capabilities that we overlay on top of what we were already given? And how do we then manage and apply those understandings and those techniques during the difficult times is really, it's important for them to understand that. And so we find that then we're able to spend more time in the actual delivery. So during base camp, we're actually measuring the basic psychometrics across 22 factors so that we're able to then demonstrate in an aggregate way the net change in the state of mental resilience of the team once they complete our training. And I think it's important to be able to provide those metrics so the organization sees that this isn't simply an investment in wellness, but this is actually an investment in the capacity of the critical defenders within an organization to be reclaiming their capacity to gain the proper rest when they need it so that they can come back in and have that clarity of decision making and optimize performance. So I think it really works on many levels, that the individuals are feeling better, the team is feeling more cohesive, more supported, and as a result, the organization is being better protected.
It sounds like risk management at a number of levels.
I think that's right. In fact, we really want that narrative to be the prevailing understanding here, that this is not just simply another wellness program, but this is an investment in reducing the risk. Effectively, if you consider the human defenders as being part of the thing that is going to help manage your attack surface, the more that we can optimize their performance and keep them committed and happy in those roles, then the organization is at a lower risk of an initial breach, or even if they are in a breach situation, they are more able to respond to that and to remediate and resume normal activities in a more effective way. So I think it's really, I would like to think that this is progressively going to be seen as an investment in risk reduction. And that way, I think we'll get the resources that we need, that organizations will begin to allocate the appropriate level of resources so that they reduce churn, they reduce people resigning because of trauma and burnout. And instead, you start to build more resilient organizations.
Along those lines, what can you share as success stories or examples so far?
Yeah, I think we capture qualitative as well as quantitative data when we work with teams, and typically we will hear, even within the first week of our programs commencing, the first thing we hear is that the morale is increased, is improved, because for the first time perhaps ever, they're feeling that the organization is directly listening to them and supporting them in a way that they feel supported. And that has an immediate boost on the sense of commitment to their role and to their job. So we see, a decrease in cynicism if they're feeling that they had been unheard and unseen. Now we're starting to make tangible progress back towards getting them properly recognized and supported. That's the first thing. Secondly, immediately, often with those that have been in high levels of anxiety and stress that have been affecting their sleep, we start to see an immediate improvement in sleep quality and duration. The protocol, the RS protocol, gives you the ability to actually go and diffuse all of that sort of pent-up emotional energy so that it's not breaking through the subconscious into the sleep state and waking you up. So we definitely see that. Another thing that we hear a lot is that they are making clearer decisions, that there's less noise going on in their head because they're actually able to come back into a place of calm where they can see the wood for the trees and they can start to see the most appropriate course of action in that moment. And they're not getting hijacked by the amygdala, by their emotional reaction or their fear of failure, or a sense that some of them carry the imposter syndrome, and they're not getting derailed by those things, and they're starting to see what those things actually are because they're able to, for the first time in some cases, to step back from the noise and start to see clearly what they should be doing. Also, I think we see improvements in the relationships within a team environment. The more that individuals are feeling emotionally restored, the more they have to give to those around them. And they also talk about developing a common language around the protocol where they can remind each other when they forget and they're getting derailed by the situation to step back into that zone of psychological safety that we are showing exists within them. We're showing them how to locate that, how to build a stronger pathway back to it, and ultimately to create that as the default state from which they then begin to operate. When we were doing our pilot programs and we were able to show that net improvement of over 27% in across 10 stress metrics in 8 weeks. So we work with 180 cyber professionals in Australia within Department of Defence and into the private sector and into the university sector as well. We got a fairly good inkling that the program was already being effective, and we were able to measure and to report on that. This year, we've launched the programs that you mentioned: Basecamp, Rapid Reset, Steady Shields, and also CISO support, which is the one-on-one support for leaders. And so what we saw when we went back and looked at the results from our first year was that there wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. I mean, although the protocol is effective when presented within the framework of cybersecurity through the languaging that we use, we then saw an opportunity to actually granularize the delivery into a more contextual way, so that Rapid Reset is designed for application within a breach situation. So it's context driven, or an immediate post-breach situation where we're delving with trauma, and it's designed to give you a concentrated dose of the IRS protocol, 2 sessions a week with a live facilitator plus a mentor call, plus you get the recordings. So the idea is to, I mean, the name says it all. It's a rapid reset. Steady Shields is designed to be a long-term thing where we're working on prevention and building resilience into teams, particularly into the younger team members. We can talk about on another time around Gen Z or Gen Z, and they're coming in with baseline levels of anxiety that are above the average population norm. And we've got to work with them to try and get them into a better state before we expose them to the trauma or the stress of the job. And then the CISO support, as I said, is a one-on-one leadership support where we can provide them with training in empathy and restoring their themselves so that they can be better leaders. And I think that those were the 3 big deliverables for 2024. Next year, we're coming deeper into role-specific stressors, where we're starting to interview people within those roles, so SOC teams, SOC analysts, incident responders, threat hunters, GRC. I think it's fair to say that the more that we delve into this, we see that there are specific stressors that are acting differently. We're very interested to start developing a nuanced delivery of our program that speaks directly to the pressures that each of those different teams or roles will encounter. And I think that really does set our programs apart from the more generic EAP type offerings. And I think that really is part of the uniqueness of our program, is that it is very heavily peer informed because it is born from cybersecurity. And so it's like speaking to like. And as a result, we tend to overcome a lot of the stigma that they might otherwise encounter. We are normalizing the conversation around burnout and stress and anxiety and these things. And I think we're helping people understand that the problem is not with them. The problem is a byproduct of the environment in which we're asking them to operate. And even that gives them an immediate sense of relief and being understood and being validated. And we often take the time to ensure that they understand how valued they are, how respected we tell them. If they don't get it externally, I think it's important as a community, as cybersecurity professionals, that we make sure that we take the time to acknowledge the value of what individual contributors and teams are actually doing and the sacrifices they're making to be in these roles.
We absolutely do appreciate the work that they do every single day. And to have a program that takes that even further is invaluable. I can't wait to see the work as it progresses. As we wrap up, Peter, I've heard you say it's about love. Will you share more with our audience about that?
This is interesting. You know, we've just concluded a partnership agreement with Deirdre Diamond at CyberSN. And she and I have this thing about the power of love. I mean, it kind of sounds corny, but at some level, I think we all understand that it's our capacity, that it's the capacity to remain cohesive and to support each other. I mean, we're loving. What are we loving? When we talk about the power of love in cybersecurity, we're talking about the love of the mission, the love of the opportunity to serve society and humanity through this work, the love that the CISO feels for their team, and it's absolutely real, and they will even use that word. How can I better support them? I love my team. It's the love of the team members for each other, that they're holding each other up, because there's nothing like a shared challenge to bond people. And I really think this is this bonding power that is the glue that's keeping us together. And the more that we can acknowledge and amplify that message, I think it's time in the evolution of humans. We've just been through a pandemic. We've seen the power of community, but we also see the power of fragmentation. And what happens when we lose that cohesion, and the polarization that we see in society is all not sustainable in the long term. What is sustainable is this, we call it lowering the entropy. There's an entropic state of just peace and order that is where we want to be. And that actually maps directly to what's happening in the brain. You're lowering the entropy of the brain when you're in those states of just clarity and concentration. Whereas a brain in chaos is very similar to a society or a network in chaos, where there's a high entropy state. And it's exactly the kind of situation that the attackers are seeking to throw us into. And so I think we have to be conscious participants in unwinding that and bringing us back into a sense of stability and support, and yes, love.
Peter, it's been great to hear from you how and where Cybermindz started, where it's at now, and where it's going. And thank you so much for all you do for the people in the cybersecurity profession. Thank you for listening to our episode today. On behalf of the Cybermindz team, to all of you doing cybersecurity work, we appreciate all you do.